Okay, so this is our Olympic Games project, and we're going to start off the video with a Birth of the Olympics video.
The Greeks had long excelled at creating incredible statuary. At Olympia, the holy sanctuary was dominated by the world's largest ivory statue to the god Zeus, the god of all gods. But long before this statue was made, another brand of superhero was also making Olympia famous, the Olympic champion. And Olympia would become the most enduring sports arena, not just across the Greek Empire, but for centuries afterwards across the world. Olympia was the only place in the Greek world where both gods and men were worshipped. In July every fourth year, from all corners of the Greek world, thousands made their way to Olympia to compete in and to watch the greatest spectacle on earth. The Olympic Games began as early as the 8th century BC with a 200-yard sprint. Held to mark a truce between two warring cities, it launched over 1,000 years of games. As the games grew in importance, the sanctuary of Zeus was transformed into the world's first sporting city, with training centers, baths, guest houses, and a stadium which could hold 40,000 spectators. Beneath this arch would run the finest athletes from across the Greek world. The games would decide on just one victor, whose reward was honor in the name of the god Zeus. The earliest race was 200 meters long. Later came the 400, then the 5,000 meters. And then there was the pentathlon, running, jumping, wrestling, discus, and javelin.
So many of the events of Olympia were versions of war. Men throwing spears, men throwing stones, men racing in hoplite armor, in heavy military equipment.
Competitors were gradually reduced to just a final pair who would fight it out in wrestling and boxing combat. But only the elite could afford to take part.
To go to Olympia meant you had to train for 10 months and then train for 1 month at Olympia itself. That wasn't for ordinary Greeks, that was for the very wealthy.
Olympia soon grew into a vast sports complex, its buildings designed specifically for each athletic discipline. As Olympia soared in importance, shrines and temples were built to glorify and honor Zeus. But at Olympia, champions were also honored with the first gymnasium, and next door, a school for wrestlers and boxers. But there were other, more unusual events housed in specially designed buildings. A contest for trumpeters and heralds was held at one end of an echo colonnade, an elongated building which could echo each note 7 times. There was the hippodrome, where chariot and horse racing events took place. Each race began with the horses being released from an elaborate starting mechanism called an aphesis to ensure total fairness. The horses raced out into the hippodrome, nearly 800 meters long. An average lap was nearly a third of a mile.
The Greek who won at the Olympic Games didn't get a medal of precious metal. All he got was a ribbon round his head, a palm branch to wave around the stadium, and an olive wreath to take home. But his real reward started when he got home. He was allowed his pick of the spectacular heiresses in the town. He'd get a meal, a good meal at public expense for the rest of his life. And over it all, the fame he would be smiled at and pointed at for the rest of his life.
The winners were recorded on statues around Olympia. Their names were even used in the Greek calendar.
They named their years after Olympic winners. For the Greeks, an event was dated, the year in which such and such won.
The games continued for 1200 years, until the Christian emperor Theodosius, in 394 AD, abolished them as a pagan event. Now the Olympic flame has been rekindled, and every 4 years, a torch is carried from Olympia to the modern site of the greatest show on earth.
Okay. So, now, let's start with the PowerPoint. The discus was introduced to the Olympics in 708 BC. Discus was made of stone, then was later made of bronze, lead, or iron. The Olympia had 3 official discs, for the Olympic Games. You were not allowed to use your own disc. Fighting was added to the Olympics in 680 BC. The objective of fighting was to have the other person submit or putting one finger in the air, for you to enable them of moving by either breaking their bones or having them, I don't know what you would do really, or just kill your opponent. So, pretty brutal. Wrestling, Olympians were taught and practiced in buildings called palaestrias. The city-state had to pay for each building themselves. Some city-states had more than one building for training and practicing. Athletes trained and competed in the nude. Chariot racing. Chariot racing was added to the Olympics in 680 BC. Maybe also, chariot racing may also be as old as the chariot itself. In Mycenaean culture, chariots were used for transport and trade, not racing.
Long jump might be as old as the foot race. The long jump is the only known jumping event of ancient Greece's original Olympic pantheon events. The long jump was put into the games probably because it reflected the crossing of obstacles such as streams and ravines. Halters, which was a handheld stone weights, kind of like normal people jump, but they were weights, were held by athletes in the ancient long jump to push themselves further. The foot race was the only event for the first 13 Olympic Games. The Diolachio was a long-distance race of 2.5 miles. The stadium was about 200 yards long, and the one-stage race was the most prestigious of the foot races. Pentathlon consisted of 5 events: the long jump, the javelin throw, the Greek discus throw, the stadion, which was this one stad, and wrestling. The penalty for cheating was they would build a statue of you and put you in the Hall of Zeus, and your family and all your city-state would be put to shame, and you'd have to pay a fine for that statue. Sometimes you would be whipped and then fined for everything, and sometimes you could also be banned or kicked out of your city-state. And here's another video.
Over a century ago, the rope climb was a test of speed and strength at the Olympic Games. The rules are straightforward. Start seated on the ground, launch yourself onto the rope, and race to the top without touching the rope with your feet or legs. In 1896, the rope climb debuted at the first modern Olympic Games in Athens. Greece's Nikolaos Andriakopoulos reached the top of a 14-meter rope in 23.4 seconds to win gold. But by the 1936 Games in Berlin, the rope climb was gone. The ball is harder than a rock and travels at 200 miles an hour. This is Basque Pelota. Pelota hails from a tiny region on the border between France and Spain called Basque. The first competitions were played against church walls over 8 centuries ago, and in the 20th century, the sport caught on in North America, where it became known as Hailai, Spanish for Merry Festival. Basque Pelota was featured at the 1900 Olympics in Paris. Spain won gold. France came second, but they were the only 2 countries that played. By the next Olympics in 1904, the sport was abandoned for being too regional. Championship croquet requires dead-on accuracy and surprising strategy. The objective is to be first to thread your ball through a series of wickets on the way to striking this colored stake. If you hit your opponent's ball with your own, you have a chance to strike or roquet their ball off the course. At the 1900 Games in Paris, croquet made its Olympic debut. Also making a debut, women in Olympic competition. 3 French women, Mesdames Desprez, Broglie, and Ognier, played for France alongside the men. In the end, Monsieur Omoit took the gold. Unfortunately, croquet barely drew an audience, so the sport was cut from the Olympics. The objective of polo is to score the most goals with a mallet that stretches from horseback to the ground. Play occurs in 6 7-minute periods, called chukkas. Between chukkas, players switch horses. Elite competitors have 6 to 8 horses on hand. In 1900, the sport of kings was added to the Paris Olympics. Due to lack of players, Mexico, France, Spain, England, and the U.S. combined to form 4 mixed teams. In 1936, polo was pulled from the games after 5 appearances. Fielding a team of horses was just too expensive. They lift their rifles and strive for perfect aim. Their target? Saucer-shaped discs made of pitch called clay pigeons. But more than a century ago, this sport was practiced with real live pigeons. And in 1900, live pigeon shooting reached the Olympic Games in Paris. Belgian Leon de Lunden took gold for killing 21 pigeons. But that was it for live pigeon shooting. The dead pigeons made such a mess that the event was dropped from the games.
The video you just watched was a video over the Forgotten Games, which include the rope climb, Basque Pelota, croquet, polo, and the live pigeon shooting. Thanks for watching.